Let's start this. All right. So guys, thank you so much for joining again. My name is Beto Navarro, Alberto Navarro. I'm a currently product designer here at Amazon. And Jackie is a co-host. She's currently a UX designer in General Electric. So we are kind of like the host for tonight. And I'll start like moving the slides on Figma. This is Friends of Figma Miami. We have had this group for almost 2 years now. We have been a little down on the talks lately because of personal, life. I recently got a home. I got married. Jackie is working super remotely all over the world, and there's another co-host that he is on paternity leave. So life happens, and that's why we haven't been on this more often. But coming next year, probably we'll pick up this up. So thank you for joining again. Hola a todos. I know we have a friend from Colombia, so bienvenido. So we are Friends of Figma Miami. We exist to share the latest best practice in user experience, product design, and coming together to help each other learn and lift each other up. I think that's very important. We're open for everyone interested in learning about not only Figma, but in design in general, right? We encourage y'all to have fun, be bold, and foster inclusivity. As mentioned, I'm Beto Navarro. Currently, I work at Amazon. I do have a small studio where I kind of like do my freelancing called Oak Studio, if you're curious about that. Then Jackie, she's a Brazilian, and she is a UX visual designer at General Electric. And then Jonathan, which is the guy that I mentioned, he's on paternity leave. He's a lead product designer at DocuSign. And we are all based in the city of Miami. As you know, the Friends of Figma kind of like chapters, we have over 200 city groups worldwide. So if you're curious about Friends of Figma, of course, you can join any of those cities and go to the talks. There's always talks going around, and just feel free to share and join them. Of course, our channel is Friends of Figma Miami. We're in YouTube, where I mentioned earlier that we try to post all these talks there. So at least they live there if you need to jump out or you need to go somewhere else. We have a Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn. We do this for the love of the sport, to say it in another way. We are just helping this community to grow. And we're not getting paid or anything. We just love to share our kind of like our own experiences with anyone. So that's why we try to do this. We have a partnerships here in the city of Miami. There are several UX groups. So if you're joined or just curious about their talks, the first one is UX and Fajitas. It's kind of like the oldest group on UX related here in the city of Miami. And they have a meetup page where they do kind of like post their own talks there. Since COVID happened, everything has moved remotely. So it's not limited to live events. So they usually have more now, streaming kind of like events. Another group is the IXDA South Florida. There's a meetup as well there, so feel free to check that out. And if you love Slack, there's a kind of like the biggest Slack channel on South Florida, and it's called Flux Yeah or Flux Hours. You can ask free to join, free to ask questions around. They have several channels, like if you want feedback on your portfolio or questions about UX or UI, or even there's a job board as well. When people they're looking for designers, they post there, or we just share kind of like information back and forth. So this is a really good resource to have if you have Slack. And then the last group is SoFlux. It's another meetup here in South Florida. So please feel free to check that out. And about me, I'm gonna be doing this talk, and just for you to learn a little about me. Then again, I'm at Amazon. I have around 20 years of experience as a designer. Just a little about myself, I pivot my career. I was originally a graphic designer, and I did that for 15 years, working in advertising and marketing. And 5 years ago, I pivoted to UX and user and product design. So that's kind of like my track of work and how I got to where I'm at now. And I'll be talking to you guys. So I'm gonna swap my share screen and go to the presentation screen. It's weird because I have a huge monitor here, so I'm looking through you guys from here.
By the way, Beto, I'm back. Technical issues here. I'm on top of a mountain in North Carolina. I think that's the reason why.
No worries, Jackie. No worries. Let's start. Okay, so hello there. So we're talking about product versus UX designer. What are these roles and their similarities and differences? As you guys know, there's a lot of terms about what does product designer, user experience designer is. Some people think that they're the same things. There are differences, but we'll try to cover that up and try to cover, I guess, how you can get into these roles as well, especially more on the product side, because I think that's where the most confusion lies. The agenda. So then again, about me, I already kind of like start talking about that. Then we'll try to define what is actually a UX designer and a product designer. And then we'll cover the similarities and the differences, because there are. Both roles are similar, but there are certain differences that make them separate. And of course, we'll cover a conclusion, what is kind of like the next steps. And of course, I'll open the floor. Please feel free to start putting questions as I go along. And at the end of the talk, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the questions. So then again, about myself again, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been both a UX and product designer. I started doing just UX design, and then when I jumped into Amazon, I started doing product. So my current role, I'm originally from Guayaquil, Ecuador, so close to Colombia. So yeah, fully fluent in Spanish. And my career-wise, I came to the States when I was 20. If that tells you more or less my age, I have been in the States 20, so you can make the numbers there. And then again, I have background in graphic design. I did my bachelor's here in Miami, working advertising, marketing, and then pivot to UX 5 years ago. Currently, I'm a product designer at Amazon. I have been in the role a little more than a year. So I have a year, 5 months in the role as a product designer. Then again, I do kind of like my side work on the studio, which is kind of like when I ever have time free, I do my kind of like side work there. And of course, I do the Friends of Figma. I'm actually the one that started the city chapter here for Miami. And then Jackie joined, and then Jonathan to help me out with the events. These are just some of the background that I have worked on. Of course, while I was in advertising, I did a lot of printing material, imaging marketing campaigns for Latin America. And then when I jumped to UX, I started working on fintech, insurtech, on small startups. And then I jumped to the consultancy side, where I work with a health startup. No, not health startup. It was a health company. It's like those big pharma companies. And then I did my jump to Amazon side. So that's a little the background there. And then I'm gonna give a heart more on the personal level. Marvel, DC, Star Wars, you name it. I love them all. Always drawing and sketching, and finding discovery sessions really insightful. And I just love to do this. I love to do these talks. Before COVID, I would just jump in a podium and do these talks. And now hopefully we can come back to those eventually. So now diving deep, product versus UX. I don't think it's really a versus thing, or it's not that each roles that they don't get along with each other, because they're really similar. But there's some quite differences that they define the roles. Um, and this survey was interesting because it just came out last week, the 2020 Design Survey Tools, and the confusion is there about the titles. If you are a product designer, a UX UI, people actually don't know what are these titles or the meaning. What I found interesting from this survey is that this was the first year that they put kind of like the role of UX and UI designer. And as you can see, it's over the top of the UX designer role. So it's kind of like a big mix now on the roles. So the confusion is there. I think it is great that, we try to cover that, and it was really insightful. Design Discovery Tool Survey is a really thorough survey. Feel free to check that out to get some insights of what are the tools that the design industry is currently using, not just on design, but on research as well, and kind of like managing methodologies. Okay, so what are these exactly? I guess we need to start on the definition part. What is product design? So product design, to put it in simple English, is just the process of creating a digital or physical good. The process is generally grounded on research and involves, of course, a user, like who is the person that you're designing for. So that the user experience comes to mind when on the product design role. Now, the confusion relies even more because usually when you mention that you're a product designer, the role is actually taken from the industrial design. So people relate that role more to the physical goods. Imagine a person designing chairs, or you can mention Apple as kind of like the leader in kind of like industrial design with all the beautiful computers or the iPhones that you might use. So the confusion starts from there. But now product design has become more on the associated with the digital products, right? Like software, apps. So that's good to consider as well. And I think part of the confusion relies there as well. So a UX designer, who is a UX designer exactly? So UX designers focus on the user satisfaction, ensuring that the product actually fulfills a user's needs. So the main focus is the user. They design with the user interaction as the main focus, ensuring that they continually improve the usability and accessibility of the product. And they rely on the design thinking process. That's the bread and butter of a UX designer. You need to empathize, meaning that you need to understand the user, define what is the problem, or what is the problem that the user is having. Then, of course, ideate ideas, then prototype, test, and the cycle repeats, right? Until you have something that it can be used and eventually built. So that's more or less the role of the UX designer. Now, the product designer pays special attention to the product on top of the user experience. So what do we mean with product is more like a holistic view of whatever you're building for. So the product designer helps create the product goals and the roadmap. If you don't know, the product roadmap is essentially a high-level summary of the future direction of products, offerings, and features. This means that, let's say, every quarter, you have a map of the features that you're going to build. And that's decided on at product level, let's say, with a product manager or the main stakeholders. So you have kind of like a roadmap that you need to follow. So that's kind of like the main difference, kind of like in high level, and I'll go deeper on what it means to think as a product designer rather than UX. But that's kind of like the main difference. They rely to, of course, do the whole user experience, which is the design thinking process, plus the product roadmap, which is the definition of the product and, kind of like the roadmap, the map that the product will follow through not only this month, but probably in the next month, next quarter, next year. So it's a long roadmap of features that you're gonna be building for that product. Now, on part two, we covered the similarities and the differences. So the main similarity, and probably the main one, is design thinking process. The design thinking, both designers do through the design thinking process, and of course, focus on the human-centered approach when designing. So UX or a product designer, they're doing exactly the same thing. But the difference and the differences are basically that you cover more the experience of the customer. So I like this chart that I found that, you can see kind of like UX at the core, because of course you need to understand the user, but the product design is more involved on what happens around the product. So when you say product, you need to think more on the view of how, let's say, a company is perceived outside. What are the touch points happening outside? Like, for example, if you work in a bank, let's say, you work in a bank, how the people that sees an ad on TV perceives the brand on perspective. What happens if the bank has a physical branch? What happens when the customer enters that branch? What do they feel when they enter the branch? It gives them confidence, or this is kind of like a sketchy type of bank, because you need to generate, for a bank, you need to generate trust, right? So that's probably the main focus that they need to have outside on the customer experience. So the product designer needs to think about that, about the holistic view of what is the product, what is basically what they're selling, how it's perceived, and how's the perception outside, on the public. So definitely they have different priorities. So for example, a UX designer, of course, the priority is the usability. But for example, if you think as a product designer, your priority probably is more on the process, the business, the cost, and the customer experience. A UX designer might ask themselves, is this product easy to use? But a product designer, they will ask themselves that this product makes sense in the current economy. If they're thinking that probably, entering recession, right? If it's worth for us to build this and, cover the cost of building this, or we might just hold until the economy gets better, for example. A UX designer might ask, how do I make my design user-friendly? But a product designer might say, how do I make my design more cost-effective? Meaning that, how do I save time, save more depth work, because you need to find those resources in order to build something. So those are more the questions that a product designer might think. So as you can see, it's not fully focused on the user experience or the person that you're designing with, but it's more on the product as well. And then another type of difference is that usually a UX designer will start working on a product, but once they launch and they send it to that, they move to another project. A product designer usually will come and continue iterating on whatever it was launched and continue the design thinking process to provide updates. How does the launch product is working right now? Is failing, or is actually good, or it can be improved? And then the iteration process starts, and you start working on top of it until you get to that ideal user experience that the user might be looking for. So the design challenges are different. For a UX designer, it will be how to achieve the ideal user experience within the available time frame and development resources. But for example, a product designer might say how to get closer to the ideal user experience with each subsequent release. A user experience might think making the experience easy for new users to get on board, for example, if they're just building a new product. But the product designer might come back and say, how do they make easy for existing users to learn about the new features or the new changes on the product, right? So those are kind of like the different scenarios of design challenges between the both roles. And then this chart is quite interesting because you can clearly see what is a user experience designer just fully focused, but then you have other areas that probably come to affect more the product design. They need to think more of the business strategy. Think of, like, for example, if your company needs to make money, how do they make money? So you probably will need to start thinking of how the business of the company works. You need, as I mentioned before, it's more on the customer experience, is the brand experience as well, right? How the brand is perceived outside. Do they trust your brand, or they're confident that if they go and use your product, they're happy, or or the product is failing them, and that probably it can be a negative connotation. Visual design as well, but I think that's not really much relevant, but kind of like the brand experience, customer experience, and the business strategy, plus the user experience is what covers product design. If you work in an environment that is or uses in UX probably a waterfall method, meaning that it's divided into project and phases, you focus probably more on that aspect. But in product, you go fully into agile method, which is divided in sprints and release cycles. And that's kind of like following a product roadmap, yeah, right? You have kind of like a map of what you're going to do in a quarter, in a certain time frame, and then you try to do that in the sprint, and then you move along. You move to the next one, and then you try to cover those sprints. If you work in an agency, a design studio, I remember when I worked in a consultancy as well, that was more falling on the UX perspective. But usually when you start more working on a software provider, think, for example, a Figma or Adobe, more at that product level, that probably, you feel more on the product side. And then I think the main differentiator as well is the people that you work with. If you work with a project manager, probably, the main goal is, just to get the project done in time and on a budget. But a product manager is a person that, they're trying to balance competing requirements and features requests from, all the stakeholders to meet some type of performance target or goal or metric. So a product manager is more, imagine that you're in a football team and they're the coach. So they need to rely on different teams in order to make it to goal, to make a goal on the other side. So that's kind of like a good analogy that I can find really useful to think of what a product manager does, and you're part of their team. So you probably be on the defense or midfield, I don't know, but just to relate a little on the World Cup aspect. But those are the kind of like the type of people that you will be working a lot with. And then part 3, conclusion. This is really a short and sweet talk, I would say, but the main conclusion is that both the UX and product designer serve the design thinking process. That's kind of like the easy part, right? Both do the same thing. If you are a UX designer, you have already the base to be a product designer. But the main difference, or the differences, is that one, the product designer needs to be more business oriented. And this doesn't mean that you need to do an MBA or study business, but at least to get the understanding of what the business is about, how basically the business make money, how do they reach their goal, their target. And that can manifest when you start working with the business team or other product teams, because usually on side you're more on siloed. You're in your design team, and from there you don't get kind of like that exposure to other teams. But when you're in product, you need to understand, how the business team works, how the marketing team works, the legal, tech. So you work with more people. And more kind of like on the last kind of column on the cross collab, you need to collaborate a lot. And you need to understand these groups because all the groups have different objectives. For example, a business team, probably their goal is to grow and launch as soon as possible. A marketing team is to launch the biggest and most beautiful campaign that everyone can see, and they can share and win a Cannes award on an event or somewhere. The legal team probably will see is the legal requirements of our product there, and we are not going to get sued if we launch this or not. So those types of goals from all these teams, you need to kind of like take in consideration, and that's kind of like how the cross collaboration works. And then taking the lead means more on, because a product design is kind of like more on the senior level of kind of like a user experience, because you need to work with more people. When you start like working with more people, understanding kind of like how everyone works, or even managing other people, probably you will start taking the lead on things. You need to start like working on making a plan and how everything is going to work. So usually when you're more a senior UX designer, maybe you can take a lead on the product side as well. And that helps a lot. And that's it. Really, I think it was really short and sweet. I tried to make it more on the easy level. You're feel free. I'm in LinkedIn. Just look at my name, Beto Navarro. Feel free to add me and ask questions there. But now I just would like to open the floor for questions. Not necessarily to this topic, but anything related to user experience or work. Jackie can answer questions as well. So I'll just stop my sharing. Please feel free to jump in camera. I think we can do this really intimate. So don't be shy, or open just your mics and start asking questions.
Beto, that was amazing. Thank you so much. It's interesting because I've been working as a UX designer for about 3 years now, and there are some points that I wasn't really fully understanding yet. So thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, no worries.
Really well the differences, because yeah, like you mentioned, sometimes those two positions, those two roles, they kind of like, have a lot of similarities. And as someone that's just starting in this business right now, I can see, sort of like questions for what is this and what is that. So thanks again. I think it was an excellent topic.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Jackie?
I do. How's married life?
Go. As you can see, I have the ring of power here, but it's not giving me power to me, but to my wife over me. So I can start there. But thank you for asking, Jackie.
Congratulations. Okay, so I have a follow-up question now. Can you? I know that most people heard what you said in the beginning. Some of us were having technical difficulties, but give us an idea of how long could be a time frame between someone that starts in the market now as a UX designer and eventually moves to be a more rounded product designer. Give us an idea, like for instance, based on your own experience, how did you make the leap?
For me, I mean, I was working as a UX designer for 4 years at the time that I applied for a job in Amazon. I mean, for the interview process, I needed to study a lot. I understood that I was missing some of the knowledge of product, kind of like related. And I was really sincere when I did the interview, that I know that probably I need a little more experience. But of course, my willing to learn and just be sure that you're hungry to learn. I think that helped me. And then after a year, I have learned so much that it's interesting, because you every time you start working on something new, you start learning something else that you might not knew. And I guess in the scope of the Amazon perspective, it's such a huge company. and so many teams here that when you start working in a new feature, a new project, and you need to go to talk to another team, then you realize that there's something more happening that you didn't know. So in terms of learning experience, it's good. If you ask about time frame, I mean, feel free. Like I would say maybe 3 years. I think probably it can be a good number. If you have more, and try to be more proactive on the aspect of trying to get to manage people. I think that will be really helpful, but understand how a business works. I think that's the most important level. If you understand that, because the business, you need to understand that a business hires you not just as a designer to do pretty stuff, forget the design, the typical design, right? That people will hire you for do a logo, right? You have the same background as me, Jackie, on graphic design. But think more of that they're hiring you as an asset that it will help them accomplish a goal for them. In this case, whatever metric they're looking for. For example, on my organization, our current metric is signups. We need to achieve certain goal in signups. So in terms of the customer experience, how do we achieve that, right? And we were measured within a certain level of signups that we need to acquire to say, okay, we're successful or we're not. So think of that. Think of what is the main objective of your business or the company that you work at, and try to understand that kind of like a thought that you're an asset to help them achieve something, not just a person that does a job and forgets about it. Try to think more on the business side.
Very good. Thank you. And how's your interaction with the stakeholders? I'm assuming that as a product designer, if you are, someone that needs to be very well knowledgeable when it comes to the actual product, you most likely have, a good deal of interaction with your stakeholders. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, on a stakeholder level, yeah, there's so many people that and literally, I was telling you how basically my day-to-day work is, because I need to deal with marketing, I need to deal with legal, I need to deal with tech, I need to deal, of course, with the product team, and understand what are the goals of each one. And because at the end of the day, everyone is a team, right? So you need to think of, then again, the analogy of a football team, that everyone is in the pitch and everyone needs to reach a goal. So you need, what is the goal, right? And everyone needs to try to, make it together to get to that goal. And a lot of people, they have different objectives. Like, for example, I just today had a call with the legal team, and they require to have some type of consent before a person joins Amazon or joins a service. So there's always that kind of like balance that you need to take. Okay, what happens if we do this, or what happens if we don't do this? And then as a team, you need to come together to a consensus, right? To say, okay, it's good or bad, and how to make it work at the end for the customer. Our always focus is the customer, and is at the end of the day, in an Amazon, we have a train of thought that the customer is sitting on the kind of like on the meeting. So we think of, okay, what would the customer say? And then at the end of the day, that's kind of like where we go. Not like what the design team decides or what the product team decides. Is at the end, focus always on the customer. So that's more or less how everything goes within us. So.
Thank you, Beto. I don't want to be the only one asking questions. I think it's a good time to open up.
Yeah, I see Madison and Bart on camera, so I don't know if you guys have any question.
I saw a question in the chat. I think Hallie had it kind of on the side there. Yeah.
Let me see. Okay.
Yeah. Do you know how product design compares to UX strategy? Just out of curiosity.
Do you know how? Sorry, I'm just reading the question. product design compares to UX strategy. I don't. I must be sincere. I don't. I'm assuming probably something similar, but I'm not sure. I haven't had the opportunity to do a UX strategy per se. Okay, no worries. No worries, Haley. Sorry, I couldn't answer the question. Anyone else?
Madison, you have any questions? No. Oh, well, not so much of a question, just thinking I'd like to have your opinion. Cause one of the things I noticed just doing UX versus product design is that the type of research changed for me, and also when you do qualitative interviews, what type of questions you would go for in those interviews. I found that you're just not focused solely on satisfaction of how the product is used, but more and more going to typical questions that product managers ask, which would lead you to find solutions for if the product will get used at all, rather than how it gets used. So you sort of become responsible to your point of getting that product management responsibility. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I will say that, for example, here we're really, I guess, tech driven. So our responsibility as working on the CX and the design is to kind of push tech to go with more on the in the terms of the usability, right? What is the best experience? Because probably sometimes tech they miss things that we see, right? That we see, for example, okay, probably we can say one click here, right? Instead of having 3 clicks, we can do the same thing in just 1 click. So that's kind of where our responsibility in CX and UX relies here. And it's a constant, I guess, not battle, but, it's a good kind of debate always to have. And then our responsibility too is to provide those data points that prove our point is right? Provide the usability test that, what we're currently doing is not the best thing, maybe we can do better. And then we start the debate, and then we see because you need to kind of have the pensum or the report or the proof that this is the best way to go, and then you put it to debate, and then at the end like I said at the beginning, we put the customer first, right? That's how we're kind of we have leadership principles here. So we always kind of any decision we need to kind of validate with those leadership principles. And the first one is customer obsession. So, the customer's obsession means that, the customer is always first for us. And, if we're not doing, satisfying the customer goals, we're not doing really our job, and we're actually failing in terms of, the work that we do. So providing that always kind of is helpful. But great question. Yes.
Yeah. And the second thing that struck me, and I'm not sure if I agree with that one, honestly, was the waterfall agile difference, where, UX is positioned squarely with waterfall, product design squarely on agile front. I really have not lived it that way. And many companies that I see, they have agile and UX rather than product. And I think I see it more as a level of maturity of the company rather than the fact whether they use agile or waterfall, which, very often can coincide, I think. And I think that's where the confusion comes from, but I don't think there's a direct relationship. And especially because, in agile, there is actually, when you look at the process, there is no definition of UX or product design at all. It's sort of forgotten in the whole process there. Whether you do Scrum or Kanban, it doesn't matter. So that's a bit where I'm on that point. Sorry, Beto, I'm a bit
No, and you have a point. You certainly have a point on the maturity. I mean, previously, before Amazon, the companies I worked, they were not that mature on UX perspective, so everything was project driven. You know, and literally happened to me that I will finish a project and just jump to the other. I will not stay or see, you know, how after lunch will, you know, go along. But that came from more on the personal experience. But I think maturity and, you know, I think there's even a grading system of the maturity of a company, right, in terms of UX that it follows. On the personal experience, when I started working here in Miami around 5 years ago, there were not a lot of companies that they did UX. So it was really, really hard on that aspect to have find a mature company. After COVID, that completely changed because a lot of companies started moving down here. And then I don't know if the perspective changed with all these companies coming down here from, you know, from New York or Silicon Valley to do tech work here. Because now, you know, it kind of like became a little boom during COVID that all these companies came. Probably the maturity probably changing that aspect. But I don't know if Jackie, you have any comments around that, or I think she just left.
I think we just lost
she
her,
just
yeah.
dropped. Okay. Because I don't know in the perspective, she works on General Electric on GE, so I don't know if she has another type of perspective on more on the UX role there and what she does over there. But yeah, good points. Madison, do you have any question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, since we're talking about waterfall versus agile, you were saying that some of the jobs you worked before you moved to product were more sort of waterfall based. What kind of jobs were those? Were those more like startups? Or are they going to be like design agencies? Because I could see design agencies really being geared towards waterfall because that makes more sense. You sort of pass it back to the company to handle that. But yeah, I was just curious on your experience that way.
Yeah, I work on 2 startups. The first one was kind of like my first job when I came back. And they basically didn't know what they were doing. They went really on project based and they just wanted to make things go on and they didn't follow any type of really any type of user or design thinking process. It was just do it. That was kind of like a really bad experience. Then I moved to a startup where they were like really, you know, it was a startup really. It was literally just 2 folks that asked me to join and try to make something from themselves. With the kind of like little experience that I had at the time, I had to kind of like educate them on the you know, user experience and kind of like follow some kind of methodology. But it was just you know, super fast. They needed to make something to launch, and that was kind of like their thing. After that, I jumped to the consultancy. So the consultancy fall, you know, on waterfall, like you mentioned. It was just project-based. I did kind of like 3 projects for them, but it was, you know, just do the project and then move to the next one. But that followed a little more structure on maturity on UX because, you know, we did the research and they have their own research team. So I worked together with them. Well, I was doing the kind of like the UX and UI. So that was kind of a little more a good experience in terms of, you know, the actual what you think of the things that we do. So that experience was good, but it fell into waterfall as well. Then when I jumped here, then it became just full agile. You know, follow the roadmap of the features that we need to build, or, you know, whatever projects we're working on, and just go follow that map, which is kind of like then again the roadmap, right? We divide everything in quarters here, and that's how we go. Everyone is assigned to the project and work closely with the PM. And another thing is that you need to learn to work with several PMs at the same time, because they're kind of like the owners of different projects. So that's kind of like the experience. Jackie, there was a question. I don't know if you can talk now, or you're.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I think I was kicked out. I'm back in now. Can you please repeat the question?
No, Jackie, from your experience in GE or any previous work, how does the process work? Is more on waterfall or agile?
Yeah, I heard that question. Yeah, and you guys are pretty right. It depends on the maturity of the company. As a UX designer right now, it's interesting because you're a product designer and I am a UX designer. It's sort of like in compare our roles. We do work contrary to what some people would think. We work in an agile environment. There's no waterfall. I can see waterfall happening if you are, let's say, a freelance UX designer and you are hired to create a series of screens, for instance, right? Your job is to actually design, a series of screens for a company. Perhaps that's when the waterfall method would be adopted. But all of the jobs that I've had so far as a UX designer, all the companies whether they were startups like the very first one that I worked out of school, or a major corporation like GE, they do adopt agile methodology. Yeah, it depends on the company and the maturity of the company. You guys are absolutely right.
Okay, cool. And then I know we're running out of time, so probably just one more question, if anyone has one. We have 3 minutes left.
Well,
Any other folks off camera?
not so much as a question, but guys, all of you attending tonight, if there's any topic or anything that you want us to explore and bring during our next Miami Friends, our Miami chapter, please let us know. Again, we're a small group in Miami. We try to explore different topics and things that we think that either first timers or seasoned designers are interested in hearing about. So if there's any curiosity about anything, specific feature, let's say on Figma, or something related to our career so far, please let us know. And thanks again for joining and for being here tonight. That's very nice to to share our knowledge with the community.
Well, thank you for organizing it, and it was a real pleasure meeting you all.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out if you need. I'm in LinkedIn, Beto Navarro. So if you want just to add me, feel free to.
I've done that already.
Okay, I'll check when I get home. I'm still in the office.
Yeah.
Likewise,
All right,
here, feel free to anything. And any questions, any comments, let us know. Leave us a message. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.
Thank you, Beto. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.